Hello friends, I welcome you all to another edition of Daily News Analysis. So in this particular edition, we are going to discuss some very important articles, obviously that are part of Hindu as well as Indian Express newspapers today. The first important article is about India-US Defense Pact. So it is a 10-year partnership that has been signed recently. Important update from the perspective of GS2 international relations. Apart from that, GS3 defense as well. Another important article is about APEC Summit, which is currently ongoing in South Korea. Important update from the perspective of GS2 international relations again. From the perspective of prelims particularly, APEC organization itself is important. When it was established, which countries are the member countries, where exactly is its headquarters, important from the perspective of prelims as well. Another important update is about US to restart nuclear weapons testing. So in recent times, we have seen this particular update from the Trump administration. Trump in particular wants to restart the US nuclear weapons testing again. So essentially what sort of challenge it will pose to nuclear non-proliferation globally is important from the perspective of GS2 international relations and GS3 energy defense as well. Another important article is about decoding India's projected GDP. So in recent times, there is very famous Piyush Goyal's statement that in another, 25 to 30 years, India will become $30 trillion economy. To what extent this projected GDP we are able to achieve is important from this particular analysis is important from the perspective of GS3 economy. So stay tuned. In decoded section, that is important for the perspective of mains particularly, we are going to look at important and interesting analysis by Nirupama Rao, who was the foreign secretary earlier. The case for a board of peace and sustainable security. So she bats for this particular board of peace and sustainable security to be established under the current UN General Assembly framework, so that there will be some sort of United Nations Security Council reforms. Although this particular board will not actually challenge the actual authority of UNSC, but to certain extent it will provide some sort of continuity, political continuity in particular, for the overall efficiency of solving the global crisis that are currently ongoing. So to what extent this particular board, this particular BPSS organization under the UN General Assembly, how it will work, what sort of structure it will have, important update and analysis from the perspective of GS2 international relations. Particularly United Nations reform is very important theme from the perspective of mains in international relations. So stay tuned. So the first article that we are going to discuss is about India-US signing a 10-year defense partnership. So with recent update, India-US has sealed 10-year defense partnership framework, signaling strategic convergence when it comes to overall Indo-Pacific strategy. Hegseth is calling it a cornerstone for regional stability and deterrence. So Mr. Pete Hegseth here is, this particular person here is the Defense Secretary of United States. So essentially, the bilateral trade relation between the two countries, between the India and the United States, is in flux due to obviously the Trump's tariff policies. Effective tariff rate on India is currently at 50%, while after the trade truce that we have covered in yesterday's DNA, China is at 47%, putting the Indian exports in particular at disadvantage when it comes to other competitors in US markets. So we have to see whether India and US are able to clinch the trade deal in the upcoming times. But what is certain is India-US defense ties are pretty much strategic and pretty much deep. Now with the signing of this particular 10-year defense partnership, what it indicates is the deepening of ties between the two countries on the defense front. So, and it also signals that India and US are major defense partners, signaling a stable ties between the two countries as long as defense sector is considered. The pact was signed following a bilateral meeting between the defense minister Mr. Rajnath Singh and his US counterpart Pete Hegseth on the sidelines of 12th ASEAN Defense Ministers meeting. See, this ASEAN Defense Ministers meeting plus ADMM plus is essentially defense ministers meeting of ASEAN members and their 8 dialogue partners. So who are these 8 dialogue partners? Australia, China, India, Japan, New Zealand, Republic of Korea, Russia and United States. These are 8 dialogue partners of ASEAN. Remember that. the dialogue partners are also important of ASEAN, although you must already be knowing the member countries of ASEAN. What exactly the ADMM plus is meeting is, it is the defense minister, it is the platform that brings together ASEAN plus these 8 dialogue partners when it comes to cooperation on defense and security issues in the Indo-Pacific, Asia-Pacific region. Scope, obviously it covers maritime security, counter-terrorism, military medicine, humanitarian assistance, etc. Obviously, it enhances trust, transparency and interoperability between the militaries of ASEAN and its dialogue partners. So, ASEAN centrality is at the base of this particular meeting. So, it was established way back in 2010, building on ASEAN Defense Ministers meeting earlier. So, there was ASEAN Defense Ministers meeting. Now, it has been converted into ADMM plus. Remember that. So, it is a platform where ASEAN and its 8 dialogue partners essentially do defense diplomacy to certain extent. So, now the current defense framework, this particular 2025 defense framework that was recently signed between the two countries, have unified vision and policy direction when it comes to overall Indo-Pacific strategy. It is deepen the defense cooperation between the two countries over the next 10 years. So, there will be stability at least when it comes to defense cooperation between the two countries. I hope the trade skirmishes between the two countries are sorted out. Our defense partnership is robust. According to the Ministry of Defense statement, it will transform the existing strong defense partnership in the United States, which will guide the entire spectrum of India-US defense relationship. Particularly, it shows the growing strategic convergence between the two countries, and defense will remain a major sort of pillar of bilateral relationship between the two countries as well. It also is a cornerstone of regional stability in the Indo-Pacific region. It will enhance coordination, cooperation, information sharing between the two countries. The framework follows the February meeting between the Modi and Mr. Trump, where both leaders have affirmed or reaffirmed their commitments to the dynamic multi-domain defense partnership and announced plan for 10-year defense cooperation and framework at that point of time. And now it has been signed. So, strained trade ties, but defense ties are robust. Very true. Despite strains in the trade ties between the Delhi and Washington, the vision of bilateral defense cooperation was encapsulated in the September 2013 joint India-US Declaration on Defense Cooperation, and also there is 2015 framework for the India-US defense relationship as well. So, although there were ups and downs when it comes to trade relationship, or overall rather other the bilateral relationship is relationship in other areas, but the defense relationship is robust with the signing of 2013 joint US-India declaration and 2015 framework for the US-India defense partnership. So, between 2016 and 2020, we signed those 4 foundational agreements. See, earlier, so way back in 2002, we signed that one basic agreement. After that, in 2016, we signed the Logistics Exchange Memorandum of Agreement, LEMOA. After that, in 2018, the Communications Compatibility and Security Agreement was signed. And then there is final BECA. There is Basic Exchange and Cooperation Agreement. We are going to see what exactly is the difference between all these 3 agreements, but essentially it enhances, it actually deepens the cooperation between the two militaries. LEMOA, particularly, it focuses on reciprocal access to each other's military logistics facility, including say fuel refueling or repairs or supply parts. Then there is COMCASA. COMCASA allows secure communication and sharing of encrypted military communication between the two systems of militaries. And then there is a BECA, which facilitates sharing of geospatial satellite and mapping data. So, with each of the signing of the agreement, the cooperation and the coordination, the integration between the two militaries gets increased. So, to certain extent, these are very foundational agreements. Means almost with all its major defense partners, US has signed all these 4 basic foundational agreements. So, with India being designated the major defense partner, non-NATO ally, to certain extent this particular four foundational basic agreement, its signing means until 2020 has transformed overall US-India defense partnership. In August 2024 also, there was signing of security of supply arrangements. Very true. There was memorandum of agreement that was signed about assignment of liaison officers, not that much important. See, another important fact here is Yuddhabhyas. Yuddhabhyas is the military exercise between United States and Indian military. So, it is in recent times we have seen, in Alaska, in the Indian military participated in Yuddhabhyas, bilateral military exercise. Remember that, very, very important from the perspective of prelims. There is, another important thing is there are big ticket military procurements from US as well. For example, there is MH-60R Seahawk multi-role helicopters, there is 6-hour rifles, M77 ultra light howitzers. Howitzers is also, sort of a mounted gun or rifle. Negotiations are underway to manufacture GE F-414 engines in India for its LCA Tejas fighter jets as well, and to procure 31 MQ-9B high altitude long endurance UAVs. So, this is also very, very important. So, we are going to see, lot of these big ticket procurements from the Indian side from the Indian side. So, essentially deliveries of GEF 404 engines for the LCA Tejas Mk1A are underway currently. So, we are going to see much more deepening of the partnership between the two countries in the upcoming time. This is very interesting and important practice question for you. Just comment your answer in the comment section. Another important update that we are going to take a look at is APEC Summit. See, most of the time, in recent times we have seen Mr. Trump, the United States President participating in the ASEAN Summit, but he has skipped the APEC Summit, Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit. See, it is a sort of a snub on Trump's part also, but what is certain is Mr. Xi Jinping, the Chinese president, did participate and took a pot shot at the United States for not participating in this particular summit. So, it is some sort of a snub when it comes to, APEC Summit. APEC itself is almost, it has the overall population of 40% of the whole world, with almost half of global trade, global trade by value coming out of the APEC. So, this particular snub by the Trump administration by Trump himself is very surprising. So, essentially the vacuum created in this regard is filled by Mr. Xi Jinping. So, the Chinese leader Xi Jinping told Asia Pacific leaders on Friday that his country would help to defend global free trade at an annual regional forum, which was essentially not attended by Mr. Trump. Xi took center stage at the APEC Summit. It is a 2-day summit in South Korea, which was overshadowed by the Trump-Xi meeting earlier. The Trump described his journey meeting with Xi as a roaring success. He obviously, we just yesterday we saw the this particular news here. What it also shows is there is some sort of relief when it comes to world economy, which has been essentially rattled by the trade tensions between the two of the world's biggest economies. So, see, the Trump's absence is pretty much notable. What exactly is the Chinese President Xi Jinping emphasized is the more turbulent the times, the more we must work together. These are the words of Mr. Xi Jinping. So, essentially, he had tried to, fill up the vacuum created by the United States. In return remarks to the APEC CEO Summit, Xi also, reaffirmed China remains open to investment and committed to upholding the multilateral trading system, saying investing in China is investing in the future. So, this sort of confidence, the Xi Jinping is showing in the growing sort of, importance when it comes to overall changed scenario, considering the changed global order. Although, US President Trump didn't attend it, US United States, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent did, attend this particular summit. Representing Trump at the summit, he said that the US trade rebalancing efforts aim to ensure all countries trade on a fair and reciprocal terms. So, this is the basic argument on the part of United States, that they have been shortchanged when it comes to trade. So, essentially, what through tariff policy, what they want to achieve is fair and reciprocal trade. with the other countries. So let's look at the basic of APEC now. So APEC was first established in 1989. So remember that it is very important organization, essentially in Asia Pacific region. It was conceptualized by Australian Prime Minister Mr. Bob Hawke during the speech in Seoul, Korea way back in 1989. 10 months later, 12 Asia Pacific economies met in Canberra to establish APEC. So it is on the insistence of Australian Prime Minister that this particular organization was established with 12 founding members. Who are these 12 founding members, by the way? That is obviously there is obviously Australia, there is Brunei, there is Canada, Indonesia, Japan, Korea, Malaysia, New Zealand is there, the Philippines is there, Singapore, Thailand, and obviously there is all important United States. After that, China joined way back in 1991. Also, Taiwan joined at that point of time. Mexico, Papua New Guinea followed in 1993. Chile acceded in 1994, and in 1998, Peru, Russia and Vietnam joined, taking the full membership to 21 countries. See, between 1989 and 1992, APEC met as an informal sort of senior official level and ministerial level dialogue summit. But in 1993, with the insistence of US President at that point of time, Mr. Bill Clinton, it established the practice of annual APEC economic leaders meeting to provide greater strategic vision in the Asia Pacific region. The headquarters of APEC is in Singapore, remember that. So the Singapore acts as the headquarter of APEC Summit. Another important thing is India is not a member, although India has shown the interest to become a member of APEC, but there is obviously the Chinese opposition is there, and the general sort of consensus there is India being not part of, say, Pacific region country, they cannot allow the membership. Although the observer sort of observer status was offered to India, but India didn't accept that particular offer. So only 3 official observers are there. Remember that APEC has only 3 official observers. Which are these 3 organizations that are official observers of APEC? Association of South Asian Nations, ASEAN Secretariat is an observer. Pacific Economic Cooperation Council, ASEAN Secretariat is one. There is PECC, Pacific Economic Cooperation Council, and then there is a Pacific Island Forum, PIF. These are only 3 observer status. There is no other country which has got that particular observer status of APEC. Remember that. Very, very important fact from the perspective of prelims here. As I said, India did engage with APEC in the past, but essentially it was not offered full membership. So this is very important practice question for you. Just comment your answer in the comment section. Very, very important from the perspective of prelims. Remember that. Another important and very vital update when it comes to international relations and GS3 defense economy, US to restart nuclear weapon testing. So in recent times we have seen Trump actually ordering the military to restart testing the nuclear weapons. And it has created ripples across the whole world, with even China and Russia warning that it will adversely impact nuclear non-proliferation. So 80 years have passed since US opened the nuclear era in July 1945 with the test of, say, a 20 kiloton atomic bomb at Alamogordo, New Mexico, and then dropped atomic bombs. We all know the history on the Japanese cities Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945 to force Japan to surrender to conclude the World War II essentially. The Soviet Union in particular at that point of time shocked the whole world when it detonated its own first nuclear bomb just 4 years later in 1949. So both these countries sort of engaged in tit for tat testing at that point of time. That was a peak of, say, Cold War era. We all know the repercussions of that particular era. The timing of the announcement is not coincidental. Now the thing is, the Trump has announced that US will restart nuclear weapons after, say, 33 years. More than 33 years have passed. So last time the US way back in 1992 tested nuclear weapons After that, it didn't test any nuclear weapon. But now, with this particular announcement, US, there are chances that US will restart testing the nuclear weapons. So to certain extent, we are going to see whether it is just for the social media clicks, or it will have actual impact on ground when it comes to testing of the nuclear weapons. But it has definitely jolted the international order when it comes to nuclear non-proliferation. It is actually a big blow to nuclear non-proliferation regime and efforts. While the details of the kind of US testing the US intends to do is not clear, it is likely to be perceived as a massive shift in US nuclear posturing as well. US being a foremost military power, anything that sort of challenges the traditional nuclear deterrence or nuclear posturing will create ripple effects all across the world. So nuclear tests in recent times, let's look at what sort of nuclear test we have seen in recent times. As I said, after the signing of CTBT, essentially Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty in 1996, post that we have just 8 to 10 nuclear tests being conducted by, say, non-signees of the CTBT. See, CTBT particularly has been signed by the United States, but it has not been ratified by United States. Remember that. Although Russia, has signed and ratified CTBT, but in recent times, we have seen, Putin resigning this particular, treaty from the Russian law itself. So now Russia has also, withdrawn from the CTBT. So what it indicates is nuclear non-proliferation regime is at risk. United States last tested nuclear weapon way back in 1992. See, China and France tested it in 1996 and Soviet Union way back in 1990. But in meanwhile, after CTBT, signing of the CTBT particularly, India and Pakistan conducted two each in 1998. So India and Pakistan conducted its own nuclear weapon tests in 1998, two each at that point of time. North Korea after that, conducted 6 times nuclear weapons between 2006 and 2007. So 2017, sorry, according to the UN. So according to UN, between the period of say 2006 and 2017 particularly, North Korea tested nuclear weapons 6 times. So that's why we can clearly see before signing the CTBT in 1996, there are almost 2000 nuclear tests that were happened. But post signing of the nuclear CTBT, there is the nuclear weapon testing is just 10 times by non-signees, essentially like India, Pakistan, or even North Korea. Russia, which inherited most of the Soviet Union nuclear arsenals, has never done so. Essentially, it held nuclear deals last week and has tested nuclear powers cruise missile and a nuclear powered torpedo, but not a nuclear warhead. So there is very important defense news we have all seen last week, Poseidon. So Poseidon essentially is a nuclear powered sort of a cruise missile, nuclear powered torpedo. So now the thing is, when it comes to the signing of the CTBT, what is the reasoning behind stopping the nuclear test? So the concerns have grown over the human health and environmental impact of, say, testing the nuclear weapons. So in United States particularly, the nuclear weapon was tested in the Nevadan desert. So in state of Nevada, there used to be one site where these nuclear weapons used to be tested. But at that point of time, the state officials of Nevada, the local people there also opposed testing the nuclear weapons in Nevadan desert. So that's why there is also this very huge history when it comes to opposition to the nuclear weapons testing. Now the thing is whether Trump's announcement will create ripple effects in Nevada in that regard or not, we are going to see. So Western tests in the Pacific and Soviet tests in Kazakhstan and the Arctic caused significant contamination. So that's why it affected millions of people and leading to long-term health issues. See, most of the time radiation persists for a long time because there is a half-life period that for that period it doesn't degrade to certain extent. So the radiation effect is long-term. So from the perspective of say testing these weapons, it also has human health hazard, it has environmental impacts which affect the whole generations or the future generations to come as well. Advocates argued that limiting nuclear testing during the Cold War could help reduce the tensions between Moscow and Washington. Very true. We all know, 1956 Cuban Missile Crisis. At the height of Cold War, the nuclear weapon would have been devastating. So that's why many advocates argued for limiting the testing. So the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty essentially comprehensively bans nuclear explosions globally. It was signed by Russia in 1996 and ratified in 2000, while United States signed it in 1996 but has not ratified it yet. In 2023, Putin revoked Russia's ratification, as I said, aligning Russia's position with that of the US. So why now that Trump has decided to resume the nuclear weapons test? See, the nuclear tests provide technical evidence on the functionality of new or existing weapons and can also signal strategic power. So it is sort of hard power projection on the part of countries as well. But whether or not that particular nuclear weapon, means it has the efficiency, or what exactly is this intended goal or intended target, whether it is able to achieve that intended target or not, we are not able to say it 100% without testing it. So that's why it has technical advantage when it comes to nuclear weapons testing. In 2020 particularly, the Trump administrations considered conducting a nuclear test which would have been perceived by Russia and China as a demonstration of US strategic strength, but it was not done so at that point of time. See, most of the time we are all talking about Russia, but the China is amassing huge amounts of nuclear weapons at the same time. So in upcoming a decade or so, China will be a dominant nuclear power as well. So US particularly wants to actually include China in any sort of treaty that will be signed, not just Russia, because because US knows that China is the one which is having all these important cards. Although currently Chinese nuclear arsenal is no match to say United States or Russia, but in the upcoming times we are pretty much sure that China will emerge as a strategic competitor in nuclear area for United States as well. So given all these factors, there is US has there is desire on the part of US as well to restart the nuclear weapons testing. Exact warhead numbers are secret, so we don't know exact number of warheads with each and every country, but there is one estimate by Federation of American Scientists which says, or which shows, Russia has almost 5,459 warheads. United States has 5,177 warheads. These total include deployed, stockpile and retired warheads. Global nuclear stockpiles peaked in 1986 at over 70,000 at that point of time, mostly in the US and Soviet Union, and have since reduced to about 12,000. See, after the signing of CTBT particularly and NPT earlier, many times the nuclear particularly weapons have been destroyed, but currently the warheads number is at 12,000 according to some estimates, with most still in Russia and United States. But China is also emerging as a third largest nuclear power with approximately 600 warheads. US China are actively modernizing their nuclear arsenals and weapons as well, because it is it shows the hard nuclear posturing. So what is this new power dynamic now? So obviously there is this triangle of say cooperation or coordination, that is US, China and Russia. So essentially there is this triangular power dynamic. As I earlier said, US wants to have a treaty which will involve China, but China is resisting this particular overture. China has urged US to still adhere to the CTBT that it signed, and it warned that the failure could prompt China and Russia to resume their own testing as well. So potentially advancing new weapons such as low yield tactical nuclear weapons. See, the tactical weapon, the nuclear tactical weapons is a very big issue, very important issue, by the way. Why many treaties does not cover it, because the range is very short, and the yield is also very short. Whether they will be included uh, in the new treaty or not is very important question. In recent times we have all seen the update when it comes to new start treaty as well. It will be, sort of expire in February 26, and Trump has shown the desire to, renegotiate this particular new start treaty as well. So beyond immediate strategic effects, 50 years of nuclear arms control would face strain due to the restarting of this particular nuclear weapons testing. Resuming testing will also weaken NPT's framework as well, and US essentially testing would contradict this grand bargain, enabling non-nuclear states to challenge their own non-nuclear status for security reasons, with nuclear powers violating their disarmament commitments. So it will be a huge, challenge to international global order as well. Need for global dialogue. So considering all these power dynamics, there need to be a global dialogue between what? Between, US nuclear testing would fundamentally change the global security environment. So that's why the development of more advanced weapons by, say, United States could prompt other countries to follow the suit. If the China resumes testing, India will be alarmed. Then, it will potentially trigger the domino effect with Pakistan as well. Then if India tests, nuclear weapons, then Pakistan will also test nuclear weapons, and it will, actually destabilize the whole South Asian region. Uncertainty may also lead to US allies to question the reliability of its extended deterrence, while historically disarmament advocating states may need to be reassessing their own security postures. So it is very true. The current world is largely led by leaders who did not experience world wars. So they don't know what exactly is the impact of nuclear weapons. So that's why they are making it much more easier to normalize nuclear proliferation even at a tactical level. So this particular thing here is important. See, whatever be the case, whether US restart nuclear weapons or not, but the talk of starting, testing of the nuclear weapon itself has triggered this particular alarm about nuclear proliferation. We just few years back we are talking about nuclear non-proliferation, but now this particular announcement will lead to more nuclear proliferation, because it will have the domino effect. While there is a hope that US President's announcement is a momentary social media slip, if the US resumes testing, the rest of the world must not allow it to compromise global security and stability. Very true. Very, very true. See, the NPT review is also approaching. Signatories could commit to global no first use policies. So there can be, a bit more, nuanced solutions to this particular issue here. What is that particular issue is, say, the global commitment to no first use policy of nuclear weapons. This can be done through, say, the renewed or NPT review that is approaching. So managed prudently, this situation could also strengthen the regimes, the nuclear non-proliferation regime overall. See, the New START treaty is expiring, and there needs to be renewed dialogue between US and Russia to actually, continue this particular treaty. In the upcoming time, China should also, join this particular New START treaty as well, so that the grand bargain, and which will reinforce overall nuclear arms control and nuclear non-proliferation, and stabilizing the overall international global order. So nuclear non-proliferation treaties are important here. I am not going to go into too much detail of it. See, there is the NPT in 1968, which was signed, CTBT, which was signed in 1996. Very interestingly, both these treaties are not signed by India nor ratified. Remember that. Another important treaty is a treaty on prohibition of nuclear weapons. Strategic arms reduction treaties like START, then there is New START. It is a bilateral treaty between US and Russia, and then there are other regional treaties like Treaty of Rarotonga, Treaty of Bangkok, Treaty of African Nuclear Weapon Free Zone. So very, very important from the perspective of prelims here. Just go through these important slides. This is very important and interesting practice question for you. Just comment your answer in the comment section. So another important and interesting analysis when it comes to GS3 economy is about decoding India's GDP projection. So in recent times, what our trade minister argued when during the Berlin Global Dialogue, India's obviously commerce and industry minister Mr. Piyush Goyal emphasized that India does not enter trade deals under duress. So under stress, it will not actually enter any trade deal. He stated that we don't do deals in a hurry and we don't do deals with deadlines or with a gun on our head. Goyal explained that India's approach is guided by long-term considerations, noting that in another 20, 25, 30 years, India is projected to become $30 trillion economy. So the article is about whether India will become $30 trillion economy in next 25 to 30 years or not. Trade negotiations therefore are made with future economy in mind to secure best possible deals. So that's why it takes much more time. The central point is that although the current US economy is about 8 times larger than India's, very true. Current economy is about say 25 26 trillion dollars. India is at say 3.9 to 4 trillion dollars. This gap is expected to narrow substantially over the next 25 years, making India a major economic superpower. Given this projected growth, it is important to assess the likelihood of achieving this particular $30 trillion economy goal. So obviously the size of the economy is measured by the GDP itself. So what is GDP? Gross domestic product. See, it measures total market value of all the goods and services produced within a country within a specific 1 year period. Obviously, it reflects the size and economic strength of an economy in global affairs. Mostly, when it comes to global comparison between the countries, GDP is a good indicator because it is total market value of all goods and services produced in that particular country. As of December 2024, the US GDP was approximately $29.2 trillion, not 25 to 26 trillion dollars, as I said, while India GDP according to 2024 financial year was $3.9 trillion. For comparison, GDP of California, that is one state in United States, has GDP of $4.1 trillion. It is more than India's whole GDP. This illustrates the relative scale of economies, showing how GDP indicates prosperity and economic vitality at the same time. So in global comparisons, a country's GDP is expressed in US dollars to enable easy comparison. This requires converting India's GDP from rupees to dollars using the current exchange rate. So that's why mostly it indicates nominal GDP, not real GDP. Remember that, because real GDP is inflation adjusted. But when it comes to comparison part, we cannot rely on real GDP because it inflation in each country is different. But what is certain is if there is rupee dollar exchange rate systems and the current exchange rate systems, we can get the valid comparison between the GDP of the two countries. GDP projections therefore depend on two factors, obviously the nominal GDP in rupees, and obviously there is another important factor that is considered for comparison is rupee dollar exchange rate. See, both factors are crucial because the same nominal GDP can yield different dollar trillion if the exchange rate had remained at 65 rupees per dollar as of 2014. However, with the current rate at 84 rupees per dollar, India's GDP in dollar terms was $3.9 trillion. So that's the comparison. The projections, whether we are in another 25 years, whether we are able to achieve $30 trillion economy or not, we are definitely going to achieve it. That's the analysis of this. That's the result of this particular analysis in the article. Assuming the $30 trillion GDP projection is for 25 years, it is useful to examine India's past 25 years of economic performance as well. So if we take past 25 years of average, nominal GDP growth, it is pretty much certain that we will achieve this particular $30 trillion economy goal in another say 25 years, by 2050 or 2048, 2050. But if we consider just 11 years, nominal GDP last 11 years, it is not so. So you can clearly see the difference here. So in this particular chart or in this particular graph here, it shows that if the nominal GDP, if we consider the average growth rate over the last 11 years, it will be $30.19 trillion by 2054. On the other hand, if we consider the growth rate projections of the last 25 years, अगर आप last 25 years के growth projections पे देखें तो by 2054 our GDP may grow to $55.9 trillion. So this is very huge gap. But on the other hand, if we go by the projections of last 25 years and assume that the upcoming times also will have that particular growth rate, only by 2046 we will achieve this $25.8 trillion goal by 2046. So by 2048 also itself we will have $30 trillion goal being achieved. If we are able to sustain, say, the average growth of last 25 years of economy. See, most of the time these are projections, so we are just assuming things here. We are going to see what sort of GDP growth or nominal GDP growth India is able to achieve in the upcoming times. But what is certain is, if we take the average of last 25 years and if we sustain that particular nominal GDP average in the upcoming times, by 2048-50 we will have $30 trillion economy. We will achieve our $30 trillion economy goal. But if we just take the last 11 years projections, and if we think that, or if we say that the average growth rate that we achieved in the last 11 years means we will have that particular same growth in the upcoming times, it will take more time to actually achieve this particular goal. It will be by only by 2054 we will be at, say, $30.9 trillion. So these are two projections which has been given. So per se the statement of Mr. Piyush Goyal is not wrong. We are pretty much going to achieve this particular goal. But what is certain is the focus should be on increasing the growth rate. The nominal GDP number is very, very important. Why? The data reveals that since 2014 or the past 11 years, the CAGR of nominal GDP has been 10.3%, while the CAGR of rupees depreciation has been 3.08%. In other words, the economy is growing at a slower rate while the rupee is depreciating at a slightly higher rate. See, depreciation and devaluation में फर्क है. So essentially depreciation is in the floating exchange rate system. If we let the rupee take its natural course according to the market conditions, essentially that is what is called according to market conditions, according to floating exchange rate system, if the value of the rupee declines, it is what is depreciation compared to, say, other country. But devaluation is essentially an intervention by the central bank in the market, so that it forcefully actually reduces the value of, say, rupee when compared to other currencies. So that particular thing happens in the fixed exchange rate system. So there is very important difference between depreciation and devaluation of currency. Very, very important from the perspective of prelims. See, most of the time, now let's come back to our article here. In 2055, India's economy, according to growth rate based on the last 25 years, would be a whopping 75% bigger than the size of the economy based on the growth rate over the past 11 years. So particularly this particular gap that we have seen, it clearly shows that the 25-year projections is the right way to go, although we are going to see whether we are able to achieve that particular sort of target or not. Another important factor is say the currency exchange rate as well. So that also is important factor, whether we are able to, say, achieve that particular growth rate or not. So very interesting and important chart here is the difference between nominal and real GDP. Obviously in real GDP the inflation is excluded. Nominal GDP inflation is essentially there, but essentially what it indicates is nominal GDP is used for the comparison part because it is at the current year prices. Now real GDP is a constant base year prices के हिसाब से nominal real GDP होता है. So this is very important practice question for you. Just comment your answer in the comment section. So in decoded section, which is important for mains, we are going to take a look at a very interesting and important article about UN reforms written by Miss Nirupama Rao. So important, very, very important and interesting article from the perspective of particularly international relations. Means, see, most of the time we all know that 80 years have 80 year, there is 80-year anniversary of United Nations, and there is always a question mark on the efficiency and efficacy or the need of United Nations system itself. See, most of the time the ongoing conflicts like Russia Ukraine conflict or Israel Hamas war, the United Nations remained just a mute spectator. Beyond certain statements, there was no actual sort of result when it comes to, say, ceasefire in these particular important conflicts. So what it shows is inefficiency on the part of United States. So the structural reform is the need of the hour when it comes to United Nations systems. But the article here, the writer here argues that structural reforms, it may happen or may not happen. There is always intransigence by the P5 countries, the permanent 5 countries, towards such structural reforms. So it will be the case that in the upcoming times we will not see the structural reforms in UN, but what we can see is some sort of reforms under the current system itself. So what is that one reform that she advocates is establishing a board of peace and sustainable security. So she proposes this particular organization under the UNGA itself. It will not infringe on, say, UNSC or United Nations Secretary General's authority, but it will have tremendous impact, according to the writer, when it comes to the political solution to the global crisis. So a tension point has been reached when it comes to United Nations. As I said, the structural reforms are at have been stalled. At the 80-year anniversary, we are all questioning the efficiency and efficacy of United Nations itself. So designed to prevent catastrophic wars, the UNSC still reacts to conflicts with no longer but sustains So designed to prevent catastrophic war, the UNSC still reacts to conflict but no longer sustains peace. Very true. It is not able to it just reacts, it gives statement, but it is not able to stop the wars, or it is not able to establish the peace, because obviously there is a veto that is available with each of the P5 member countries. The peace agreements falter, transitions stall, diplomacy, rather than being an ongoing process, has become a form of a crisis theater. United Nations halls are sort of a theater itself, activated too late and withdrawn too easily. It is talking about peacekeeping processes here, peace building process rather. The problem is not about political divisions, it is about institutional design itself. So there needs to be some sort of structural institutional reforms. The UN has no dedicated body to maintain political accompaniment once violence slows and mediation efforts fade. Suppose suppose even if there is some sort of truce that has happened because of, say, the efforts of United Nations Security Council, but how to sustain it? Many times just after securing the peace deal itself, the violence again resumes, the war again resumes. So there is no sort of way that United Nations is able to sustain the peace and security of the region for a longer time, because it hasn't been accompanied by any sort of political accompaniment. So to certain extent, the author bats for this part of political realignments in the conflicts. The UNSC authorizes actions but is structurally episodic. Very true. The Peace Building Commission, though a valuable initiative, lacks the mandate and authority to engage during active political transitions. So Peace Building Commission is there, but to certain extent, it doesn't have that particular political sort of backing. The UN loses continuity, it loses context, it loses momentum, and it forgets. That is pretty much true. These are very important and interesting words, by the way. Peacekeeping mission stabilizes the ground conditions but are seldom equipped with any sort of political strategy. So these sort of missions doesn't actually interfere in the internal matters of the countries. So it doesn't provide any sort of political reconciliation or solutions to the transient issues. Particularly, structural reform of the UNSC is necessary and long overdue. Very, very true. But waiting for such reforms as a precondition for all institutional innovation is a strategic, foolish mistake. Functional reforms are pretty much possible according to the writer. Reform that strengthens the UN's ability to act now using powers that are already existing in the UN systems, which are existing under the UN Charter, by the way. What sort of powers these are? There is, United Nations General Assembly, Article 22 of the UN Charter, which gives the authority to UNGA to establish new subsidiary bodies to carry out its work. So that's why, the author suggests that this particular body, the BPSS, can be established by UNGA itself under its own authority under Article 22 of the UN Charter, so that it can it use this power, so that there will be some sort of political solution to these conflicts, and there will be political continuity, and that will sustain the peace and security in the region. So, author advocates for the UNGA to use this particular power under Article 22 to establish Board of Peace and Sustainable Security. So, Board of Peace and Sustainable Security would address the current institutional gap in conflict resolution without challenging the UNSC's authority or interfering in the sovereign affairs of the states. It would not engage in early warning or pre-conflict interventions, but instead focus on structured political engagement during and after conflicts where UN involvement currently weakens. So, what she advocates is this particular body here, it will essentially does not interfere or with the sovereignty of the countries, nor it will interfere in the working of the United Nations Security Council sort of authority. But what it will provide is a platform for structural political engagement during and after conflict. Its role would be political, not coercive, supporting nationally led dialogue, peace agreement implementation, and regional diplomatic coordination, which this is very, very important, while ensuring peacekeeping operations are linked to realistic political outcomes. So, it will fill that political vacuum that has been created, say, even if the UNSC gives the solution to this particular conflict, as I earlier said, to any particular conflict, as I earlier said, most of the time sustaining the peace becomes an issue because there is a lack of political reconciliation, which is a problem. So, essentially this particular body will fill that particular gap. The board would work in coordination with UN Secretary General and UNSC, absorb the Peace Building Commission and align UN peacekeeping and peace building strategies. So, essentially the author suggests that you can actually include whole of peace building commissions and peace building efforts or peacekeeping sort of UN peacekeeping efforts under the BPSS, so that it addresses the issue of, say, conflict resolution holistically. It would fully respect UNSC authority and the Secretary General's prerogatives under Article 99 to avoid duplication or encroachment. So, what is this Article 99 of the Charter? So, under Article 99 of the UN Charter, that is the provision which gives the United Nations Secretary General the discretionary power to bring any matter that threatens the international peace and security to the attention of the Security Council. So, it is the authority given to the UN Secretary General, so that it can, he or she can bring any matter that threatens the international peace and security in front of to the attention of Security Council members. When invoked, it obligates the Security Council President to call a meeting to discuss the issue. See, it is a very powerful tool which is available to UN Secretary General, making it the only independent political tool given to the Secretary General. So, this is the only political tool which forces United Nations Security Council to discuss that particular conflict or issue, if it is invoked by the United Nations Secretary General. So, very important article given under the UN Charter, Article 99, remember that. Then what also is suggested is the representation when it comes to Board of Peace and Sustainable Security. So, suppose we establish the BPSS, but who are going to be the representatives in this particular body? The credibility will depend on the wider, fair and diverse representation. Board of Peace and Security, Peace and Sustainable Security, BPSS, with its member composition will have this particular credibility. It must be representative yet manageable, neither an elite club nor an open forum as well. See, most of the time it should not be unwieldy. There should not be too many members, but it should not feel like an elite club of countries as well. A rotating membership can be thought of about say 2 dozen states elected by UN General Assembly for a fixed terms that would balance, and there is periodic renewal in membership as well. Formal regional distribution would guarantee fair representation to Africa, Asia, North America, Latin America, etc., to the Caribbean and West Asia, which are essentially, these are the countries which have not which have don't have sort of political representation in United Nations Security Council. Regional organizations would serve as a full participants, not observers, acknowledging that peace is shaped globally from Addis Ababa, Jakarta, Brasilia to New York. The board would exclude permanent seats and veto powers. The board would not have this particular provision. No, there are no permanent seats nor veto powers, basing its structure on the participation rather than privilege. So very, very interesting suggestions that has been given for the overall structuring and membership of say BPSS. Agenda items could be introduced by any UN member state, a regional organization, or even UN Secretary General. Civil society participation would be encouraged, although not voting. The guiding principle would be sustainable security. Political agreements again gain legitimacy through good governance, inclusion and responsible leadership. Sustainable security is a not preventive intervention but a sovereignty respecting approach as well. It links security to political reality. So it will be a sort of a preventive security and reinforcing nationally led approaches as well. So BPSS is an organization which focuses on governance, good governance as well. At the same time, preventive security is what will be the guiding principle. Style of functioning: the Board of Peace and Sustainable Security would function as a working institution and not merely another forum for statements. By doing so, it would drift in prolonged UN engagements and provide political direction during early fragile peace process. Its mandate, though modest in appearance, would be significant in effect because it will sustain the peace. The board would embed a disciplined form of political accompaniment at the core of the UN system, creating continuity without expansionism and coordination without confrontation. So these are also very important and interesting principles that will be adhered to by the BPSS. Continuity without expansionism and coordination without confrontation. Coordination without confrontation is very, very important, particularly when it comes to political reconciliation or filling that political gap post resolution of the conflicts. But there is always confrontation. So what the board will actually promote is coordination without confrontation. It would reassure states that their sovereignty is safeguarded. They are not infringing on the sovereignty of the states, assuring societies that international law and the international community will not abandon peace efforts at the same time. So very true. In recent times we have all seen the images from the Sudan as well, from the Nigeria as well. So to certain extent, these are pretty much important conflict areas which are often ignored. There is no political reconciliation efforts, and many times there are military coups that are happening in these remote African countries. So to certain extent, this particular board, with its mandate of say political reconciliation and say overall overall mandate of sustaining the security and peace in the region, will have transformative impact. So in conclusion, we can say is that the UN once embodied this understanding and can do so by innovating wherever it is possible. What it can do is, institutions should serve ongoing processes, not fleeting moments. So institutions need to serve ongoing processes, not just in fleeting moments. So that sort of United Nations, this principle was once embodied by the United Nations, but this BPSS will continue this particular actually process. The BPSS will not redistribute geopolitical power but would improve the UN's ability to manage conflict responsibly. This is where the meaningful reform can begin. So this is very interesting and doable reform on the part of United Nations, establishing this particular BPSS board. So under the current framework itself, it can be established. There are there is Article 22, which gives the United Nations General Assembly the power to establish such particular body. And then there is It will not infringe on, say, the mandate of UN Security Council, nor it will infringe on the working of United Nations Secretary General's authority as well. So, but it will be huge sort of authority when it comes to political reconciliation and continuing the peace efforts in the beleaguered conflict-ridden regions. So, very interesting and important article from the perspective of UN, overall UN reforms. So, this is very important practice question for you. That's it from my side, and stay tuned for another edition of Daily News Analysis. Thank you.